Elira Voss had lived her whole life in the shadows of Blackthorn Pack, and she had learned long ago that shadows were the safest place to be. She had been born blind, her eyes pale and clouded, and from her first breath, her own father had looked at her the way one looks at a mistake. Alpha Corvin Voss ruled Blackthorn with pride and iron discipline, and a blind daughter did not fit into the picture of strength he wanted the world to see. So Elira grew up quietly, tucked into the corners of the pack house, rarely spoken to, rarely seen. The other wolves called her the Broken Omega. They said it without cruelty sometimes, and with plenty of cruelty other times, but the meaning never changed: weak, useless, a burden the pack carried out of obligation rather than love. Elira had stopped arguing with the words years ago. Arguing required people to listen, and no one in Blackthorn Pack listened to her. What none of them knew, because none of them had ever cared to notice, was that Elira's blindness had given her something else in return. She could not see faces, but she could hear the smallest shift in someone's breathing when they lied. She could smell fear rising off skin like smoke. She could feel the air change before a storm, before a fight, before danger walked into a room wearing a friendly smile. It was a gift, though she had never once been allowed to call it that. The day everything changed began like any other. Word had spread through the pack house that Alpha King Cade Ashran was coming. Cade Ashran was not just another visiting alpha. He was the wolf set to become supreme alpha of all the packs within the month, a position of enormous power, and his visit to Blackthorn was meant to be a final inspection before his coronation. Every pack wanted to impress him. Corvin Voss wanted it more than most, and he made it very clear, in the sharp tone he used only for Elira, that she was to remain out of sight. "Stay in your room," he told her, not meeting her clouded eyes. "The king does not need to see a blind girl stumbling through his visit." Elira nodded, because nodding was easier than arguing, and returned to the small room she had learned to call safe. She sat by the window, feeling the warm sunlight on her face, and listened to the pack gathering below. She could hear Celine Marrow's voice rising above the others, sweet and performative, the voice Celine used whenever she wanted an alpha's attention. Celine had never hidden her ambition. She wanted to be Luna one day, and she wanted the world to know it. Elira might have stayed in that room the whole day, invisible as always, if not for the scream. It came from the courtyard, sharp and sudden, followed by shouting and the scrape of claws against stone. Elira's body reacted, before her mind caught up. Something was wrong. Not an ordinary quarrel, not a training accident. There was a wrongness in the air, a bitter, metallic edge that made the hair on her arms rise. Without thinking, she left her room and made her way down the familiar hallway, one hand trailing the wall, until she reached the courtyard doors. The moment she stepped outside, a low growl rippled through the crowd, but it was not aimed at her. It came from beside her, close enough that she felt the heat of a massive body settle protectively against her side. The courtyard fell silent. Elira did not need to see to know that something extraordinary had just happened. She could feel dozens of eyes turn toward her, feel the shock rolling off the crowd like a wave. The enormous wolf beside her did not move away. He stood firm, his body angled between Elira and the rest of the pack, growling softly at anyone who dared step too close. "That is the king's wolf," someone whispered, disbelief thick in their voice. "Ronan. Why would Ronan protect her?" Elira had heard of Ronan, of course. Every pack had heard of the Alpha King's wolf, famous for his intelligence and his fierce independence. He was not simply an extension of Cade Ashran's will, as most wolves were of their alphas. Ronan was known to act on his own instincts, and those instincts had never, in all the years of Cade's reign, chosen to protect anyone but the king himself. Until now. Alpha Corvin pushed through the crowd, his face pale with a mixture of confusion and dread. "There has been some mistake," he said quickly, forcing a smile toward the man walking calmly behind Ronan. "My daughter is blind, Your Majesty. She should not even be out here. I apologize for the disturbance." Cade Ashran said nothing at first. He was tall and composed, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing, and he studied the scene before him with quiet intensity. His wolf had never once acted like this. Not for royalty, not for danger, not for anyone. And yet here he stood, shielding a girl the pack had clearly decided was worthless. "Ronan," Cade said, his voice low and even. "Come." The wolf did not move. A murmur of shock spread through the crowd. Celine, standing near the front, let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Perhaps the wolf is simply confused," she said sweetly, though her eyes glittered with something colder. "She has always been strange. Maybe he smells sickness on her." Elira said nothing. Defending herself had never done any good before, and she doubted it would help now. But Ronan's growl deepened at Celine's words, low and warning, and Celine took a quick step back, her confidence flickering. Cade's gaze moved to Elira properly for the first time. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elira," she said quietly. "Elira Voss." "And you have no explanation for my wolf's behavior?" She shook her head. "No, my lord. I did not ask for his protection." Something in her honest, unbothered tone seemed to catch Cade's attention more than any excuse could have. He studied her a moment longer, then turned to Corvin. "I would like to speak with your daughter, alone." Corvin's face twisted with humiliation, but he had no choice but to agree. Cade led Elira, with Ronan pressed close at her side the entire way, into a quiet room away from the courtyard's staring eyes. "Tell me what happened out there," Cade said once they were alone. "Before the scream. What did you notice?" Elira hesitated, unused to being asked her opinion about anything. "I smelled something," she admitted, "beneath the flowers in the courtyard, something bitter. Like crushed almonds, but wrong. And there was a man near the east wall whose heartbeat was too fast, faster than nerves alone would cause. He was afraid, but not embarrassed. Afraid. Guilty afraid." Cade's expression sharpened. Where exactly was he standing? She described it as best she could, the direction of his voice, the pattern of his footsteps, small details she had never thought worth mentioning to anyone before. Cade left the room briefly, and returned only minutes later, his jaw tight. "There was a blade hidden near the east wall," he said, "and poison in the wine meant for my table tonight. You may have just saved my life." Elira's breath caught. "I only noticed what felt wrong." "Most people notice nothing at all," Cade said quietly. "My wolf noticed you before any of this happened. Now I understand why." Word spread quickly through Blackthorn Pack, though not everyone believed it. Many still whispered that it was luck or coincidence or some trick. Corvin, embarrassed and unsettled by his daughter's sudden importance, tried to downplay the entire event. Celine grew colder and more resentful, convinced that Elira was somehow scheming her way into favor she did not deserve. But Cade did not waver. He assigned Elira a place near his personal quarters, under his protection, and made it clear that anyone who dismissed her abilities did so at their own risk. Ronan rarely left her side, always alert, always watchful, as though some invisible thread connected him to her safety. In the days that followed, Elira's senses proved themselves again and again. She noticed a servant slipping something into a dish that turned out to be more than a friendly refill. She sensed hesitation in a guard's steps that revealed him as an informant for a rival pack scheming against Cade before his coronation. Each time, Ronan positioned himself as her shield, and each time, Cade grew more certain that dismissing Elira as broken had been the greatest mistake of his life, though not his own. Celine watched all of this with mounting desperation. She had spent years building her position, flattering the right wolves, positioning herself as the obvious choice for Luna. Now a blind Omega, someone she had mocked without a second thought, was becoming the center of the king's attention instead. She could not accept it. Quietly, Celine reached out to contacts from a rival pack, the same one Elira had already helped expose. She offered them information in exchange for help removing the obstacle standing in her way. She told herself it was simply survival, simply ambition, though deep down she knew it was something far darker. The trap was carefully laid. A message was sent to Elira, claiming Cade needed to see her near the old training grounds at dusk. Trusting the king's household, she went without hesitation, Ronan trotting quietly beside her as always. But something felt wrong the moment they arrived. The air held that same bitter, wrong scent she had noticed before, stronger now, mixed with unfamiliar voices trying too hard to stay silent. Ronan's ears flattened, and a growl built low in his chest. Before the ambush could fully close in, Ronan's warning howl tore through the evening air, sharp enough to be heard across the entire territory. Cade, already uneasy, after receiving no confirmation that he had sent any such message, was already moving toward the training grounds when the howl reached him. He arrived within moments, along with several loyal guards, catching the intruders before they could act, and revealing Celine's involvement through a hastily dropped note bearing her handwriting. The pack gathered the next morning, summoned by Cade himself. Elira stood beside him, quiet but no longer hidden, as he addressed the crowd that had spent years overlooking her. "For as long as I can remember," Cade said, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard, "this pack believed that blindness meant weakness, that a girl who could not see was a girl without value. You were wrong. Elira has saved my life more than once, using senses none of you bothered to notice she had, because you were too busy deciding she did not matter." He turned to Celine, who stood pale and trembling near the back of the crowd. "You conspired with outsiders against a member of your own pack, out of jealousy alone. That will not be forgiven quietly." Celine was led away, her ambitions collapsing around her, while murmurs of shame spread through those who had mocked Elira alongside her. Cade then turned to Elira, his expression softening in a way the pack had never seen from their king. "My wolf recognized something in you before I did," he said. "He was right to protect you. You are not broken. You are exactly what this pack and this kingdom needs." Corvin, watching from the crowd, said nothing, though for the first time in years, he could not meet his daughter's face without shame settling deep in his chest. In the weeks that followed, as the coronation approached, Elira stood at Cade's side, not as a shadow anyone tried to hide, but as someone the entire pack had learned to respect. Ronan remained fiercely loyal, never far from her, a living reminder that some bonds could not be explained by hierarchy or status, only by instinct too strong to ignore. The pack that once called her broken now watched her walk through its halls with quiet confidence, no longer flinching from stares, no longer waiting to be dismissed. She had spent her whole life being told she did not matter, and in the end, it was not her sight that proved them wrong, but everything she had learned to see instead. On the day of the coronation, as Cade Ashrin was crowned Supreme Alpha before packs from every territory, Elira stood beside him, unafraid, unhidden, and finally, undeniably, seen.